It hits you right around 2 p.m. You're sitting at your desk, staring at the screen. The cursor is just blinking there, kind of like a heartbeat on a flatline monitor. Your mind is completely frozen. We usually call this creative paralysis, right? But neurologically speaking, it's cognitive suffocation. The modern workspace has literally become a clinical hazard for human ingenuity. But here's the thing, there's actually a highly effective physiological intervention for this, and it's been hiding in plain sight. Let's dive into this explainer and look at the neurological prescription for the sedentary mind.
Consider our very first case study. It's a visceral symptom of the confined mind. Charles Dickens didn't just walk for leisure. No, he paced the foggy, gaslit streets of London at night, logging up to 20 miles at a time. Why? Well, because the anxiety of the blank page was tearing his neural pathways apart. He was desperately trying to prevent a psychological rupture.
That blank page, or that glowing screen, it's become a cage. When you sit completely still, staring at a really complex problem, you're trapping your brain's central executive network in this endless, exhausting loop. You're demanding brilliant solutions from an organ that is, quite literally, starved of the biological momentum it needs to actually synthesize them.
Which brings us to Section 1, Diagnosing the Greats.
Look at the historical patient files. We've got Dickens pacing in the dark, Friedrich Nietzsche marching in complete solitude for 8 hours a day, claiming that all truly great thoughts are conceived while walking, Virginia Woolf wandering London to find rest, Steve Jobs enforcing those famous walking meetings to bypass mental blocks. These brilliant minds, they weren't just exercising, they were self-medicating, treating their creative asphyxiation with massive, prescribed dosages of forward motion. So how does this actually work? Let's move to Section 2, Anatomy of a Breakthrough.
Underneath the skull, a surgical shift occurs. We call it transient hypofrontality. When you stand up and take a step, your brain suddenly has to allocate resources to motor coordination and balance. So to survive, it physically powers down its rigid control center, the prefrontal cortex. That harsh internal critic, it goes dark. The strict rules just drop away, and suddenly unusual, bizarre ideas are allowed to violently collide. And as that prefrontal cortex dims, something ancient wakes up. The default mode network. Neuroscientists actually refer to this as the brain's dark energy. It thrives in the shadows of mind wandering, feeding on the subconscious. When you stop forcing your focus and just start moving, you awaken this hidden neural web. And this is exactly where true divergent genius lives. Think about it like this. Sitting rigidly at your desk taxes your central executive network to the point of absolute failure. You feel the fatigue, right? That heavy blockage. But walking fundamentally alters your internal biology. It reroutes the power. It transfers that heavy cognitive load away from the exhausted executive network directly into this restorative, pattern-connecting default mode. And we're not just guessing here. Section 3, Clinical Proof of Concept. We no longer have to rely on the romanticized diaries of dead authors. Look at the definitive proof from Stanford University. They tested 176 subjects, rigorously mapping their creative output. The data is undeniable. The mere act of walking drastically outperformed sitting when testing divergent thinking. Even just marching on a blank indoor treadmill elevated creativity. But walking outdoors? That triggered an absolute massive peak. Comprehensive meta-analyses published in journals like PLOS One confirm this reality. So let's be clear, this isn't some psychological placebo, it is a biological imperative. Your brain literally requires this forward momentum to shatter its own established patterns. In a massive Austrian study, researchers wanted to isolate the exact microsecond that inspiration strikes, so they strapped chest sensors to their subjects, tracking their physical acceleration 64 times every single second. They monitored the movement and then pinged their smartphones to test verbal creativity in real time. And what they discovered is a phenomenon called the incubation gap. The spike in creativity, it didn't happen while they were sweating. It happened later. A 20-minute walk acts exactly like a biological time-release capsule. It floods the brain with oxygen, and then, a full hour later, as the body cools down, it triggers this massive, delayed surge of synthesis. But the laboratory of the mind requires the correct external conditions. Section 4, the environmental variable. Gray urban grids actually suffocate the brain with a massive cognitive tax. Dodging traffic, reading signs, filtering noise, it forces directed attention. It spikes your cortisol. But natural green spaces, they provide soft fascination, rustling leaves, moving water. This triggers involuntary, effortless attention, acting as a rapid parasympathetic release valve for your overloaded nervous system.
Now that we've isolated the mechanism, let's get to the cure. Section 5, the prescribed dosage. Here is your clinical protocol for creative survival. You need a purposeful pace of about 3 to 4 miles per hour, fast enough to push oxygen, slow enough to avoid nervous system exhaustion. You need 15 to 30 minutes to trigger that time-release gap. Find a green space, and crucially, wear heavily worn-in shoes. Listen to this. Even a slight pinch from a new shoe forces your brain to monitor a physical threat, which instantly kills the default mode network. Crazy, right?
To build the ultimate defense against the blank page, you must enforce the zero errand rule. No groceries, no bank runs. Adding a single task forces your brain right back into that rigid executive network. Just walk, let the network engage, and when the ideas finally hit, do not look down at a screen. Use hands-free voice dictation like Whisper Flow to completely eliminate cognitive friction. Let your mind pour out its contents without breaking the trance.
The modern desk is starving your brain. We've seen it. The historical evidence is clear and the neuroscientific data is absolute. The prescription is written. Your desk is a cage, but the door has been unlocked this entire time. So the only question left is, where will you walk today to finally set your mind free?